Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Transform podcast. Excited to be here once again with Anand to talk a little bit more about leadership and an organizational topic today. Anand, I wanted to chat a little bit about something that I've seen going on in the, maybe not only in our industry, but maybe broader as well, that job profiles and job roles have become very, very focused, very, very narrow in many organizations. And the question to debate today is whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, if it's helpful or harmful. What is your take on that, having these jobs that we see posted at companies that have a very, very narrow, oftentimes a very technical focus on one specific technology?
I have mixed opinions about it. Okay. Now, let me start off with something that's really selfish. Okay. Uh, which is, I've always excelled in any job that I had. Like, I was probably would beat anybody sitting next to me. But that was because of skills that are not definable. Like, I was good at working with people, I was entrepreneurial, I was good at problem solving, things that made me successful in a job. But I always struggled to find a new job with those skills because I didn't have a specialty. So,
Like a certification or something, you could say like, I'm really good, I'm the best at this very
that,
tiny narrow thing.
right. And I have felt that people, and now it's, we are all looking at everything from our lens, but as leaders, we've managed teams before. We also have to take a step back and see what makes our teams successful, right? Culturally. Um, and so it's a bit of both. Okay, so the way I differentiate that, the way that I have now come to peace with that is, it depends on the type of problem you're trying to solve, right? Like, if for, you need specialists to get things started, but if you're trying to keep an organization's culture thriving over a long period of time, then it's teamwork, it's adaptability. Those skills are a lot more important to thrive than to get started. So it's
Yeah, I
almost as
think
if you have to look at, like, two different types of skill sets, right? Do you want this person to get something started or narrow focus, or you want this role to play a larger role in your organization in a long in over an extended period of time?
right. I think that that's a good explanation of how that makes sense. Because to me, right, when I engaged people, when I hired people, I made the differentiation between a project where I needed somebody with a very good technical expertise, because I didn't want to spend a lot of time getting a consultant up to speed, for weeks or months, right? I wanted somebody who can come in, get up to speed on the workings of the organization, but not so much in training them on the specific technology. So I think that's a fair assessment. But when you have, I mean, I see a lot of jobs at companies, full-time jobs, that have the same narrow focus, right? Like, hey, a Salesforce developer, right? Because to me, the question is, hey, right now we're on this specific technology, but I want to be able to switch to something else in 6 months, perhaps, right? Do you have then this one person who's invested a lot of time and energy in their career, willing? I mean, that's
Mhm.
sort of right, but are they willing to say, you know what? I'm going to throw all of that out, or this was my foundation. I'm going to jump over to the ship and start over something new, right?
Yeah, see, over specialized hiring, which I don't know if that's a term, but let's call it that,
That
right?
sounds like a good term.
uh, but depending on how much of a roadmap you have, they may quickly outgrow their roles and they'll feel stuck. I've had times where I've hired people for specific things and they were really good at that, but they've
Right.
come to me and said, look, you have to make me work on these things. And I'm like in a big corporate environment, unless you're a technology company, like on the cutting edge of things always, when you're in a corporate job in an IT department, let's just say, like you and I have been in a pharmaceutical, healthcare, whatever that is, you're not necessarily driven by technology, right? So I've had people come and say, give me some. I'm like, I don't have anything, man. This is all like we are trying to solve a business problem, and we have done what we can with your skill sets. And I've encouraged people to leave and find something that fits their needs, and they have, right? Um, but on the other hand, let me give you a personal example of when we made this shift, but there was a lot of pushback from the team for right reasons. Okay, I had a group of people who specialized in Java, like the typical
Typical tech
technology that
stack,
you would get a job, right, in the
right?
market with. And then we tried to build this huge automating and enrollment process for a big part of that company that I was. It was like $1 billion worth of business, right? It was pretty, and we were automating that whole process. And we went on a completely different stack of technology that the team had never worked on. It was open source, and it was not on the databases they were comfortable with. Like everything was new.
Yeah. So did you get the team to level up to the new needs, or did you have to go replace the team or augment the team in the short short
So,
terms?
bit of both. So, we hired some specialists to come to get us started. First of all, before that, now you have to go make a case to the team that this is something they want to do, because it's not practical for you to replace everybody in the team, right?
Right.
It's just not going to happen. So, it required some level of convincing, so to speak, with the team on why that's adding value to their career, which was that they're learning new technologies, they're
Right.
building a business application that makes a difference. And to some extent, you should have had that culture already in your team to be open to that. So it kind of goes back to the previous point is when you hire, you have to hire people with that kind of mindset. Okay,
Right.
is I'm going to adapt. I'm going to Adaptability is a skill that they have. They're open to solving problems differently, things like that, right? But it happens over a period of time. This was the test of that, right? So we I had to take time to go convince them that this is good for their careers to begin with, and that this is solving a problem that's much bigger than all of us, which is automating something for a fraction of a cost that would happen some other ways. And the next thing is, I don't have the skills. So you send them for training, and then we brought some specialists to get us started. That's where
Right.
my thought of having specialists to get started, but having different skill sets to for a longer term.
Yeah.
But eventually, it took what the 6 months for us to build that. We supported that for like the 4 years after that. A lot of challenges and stuff like that. But it's that skill of being adaptable. It's the skill of being open to new things, not necessarily tied to a specific technology, was what made that successful. But I also understand why people are hesitant because the market doesn't need people like that,
Right.
right? So it's like a catch 22, double edged. Like you want people to be this way, but the market is not hiring for people that like that for the
Yeah.
most part.
Yeah, I think it's from what I see, it's a little bit of a double-edged sword, right? If you're in this situation of like, hey, I need somebody to get some work done, right? Of course, the best thing is to have somebody with the skills ready now, right? To execute, dive in, and solve that challenge. But then you have also, I think this, like you said, this bigger perspective, right, of a career plan, of personal development, right? I think which then becomes more a topic at the forefront, where you go into a role and maybe you can even advertise a role of like, hey, you're going to come in here and you're going to bring in your current special technology skills, but we have a plan for you. You'll be able to grow and learn more as the business grows, as the business changes, right? And I think that's like on the one side of where you start, but on the other side, you're also looking at where people are coming from, right? When you look at and coincidentally, yesterday I had a brief chat with a professor of mine from my undergrad computer science program, and he just made a comment about computer science programs kind of hanging in the balance right now because of AI and other reasons, right? Because you learn so much depth and breadth about, technology, but then you end up in this very narrow specialized niche, right? Where it kind of like all fades away, and you're being put in this hole, where you just use a sliver of what you might be capable of. And that's why I think this is, to me, it's almost a lost opportunity in some businesses, where if you hire somebody in and you bring them in, you just let them do a very, very narrow piece that you might not be able to leverage their full experience and full expertise along the way. I don't know. What do you think? Might be a good way of enabling that and really let people flourish.
Yeah, I mean, the question to that. So based on what your conversation with the professor is, do you think then the problem is even before lot? This is something we need to solve at the undergrad level, at like certain. Not even like, maybe we are reacting it too late when they are ready to go into corporate world or into the job market. Do we value these skills when we on how we decide to get somebody into a program in colleges? I don't know if we do or not. My son is in college. I don't think it mattered as much. It's the GPS that matter, right?
Right.
So it's culturally, I think. I mean, that's for another day probably, but I think culturally, that's how, for lack of better words, that's how we've been programmed into the workforce.
Right.
So it's very difficult to change at that point unless you go back and make a sweeping change about how we actually grade people, how we admit people into colleges,
Right.
things of that nature, which I'm no expert in, but I'm interested if your professor had any opinion about that, or we should have a podcast with them to talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, if you go that far back, right, and even go before that, what do we do with kids in school, right? We give them like a whole garden variety of topics, and we try to get them as much exposure and visibility into problem solving different topics, right? General education is still part of the curricula at most schools, right? But then you get out of that, and it's like boom, you're in this very small topic, and if you don't play it right, you're going to be stuck. Right?
Yeah. So to answer your previous question, it depends on the person. So you can set your organization's vision to be such, right? Which is I want people with these skills and all that. But that doesn't mean that some people may not get attracted to it. They want to stay narrow. It depends on the personality.
That is
right?
correct. Yes. Yeah.
It's not for everybody. So to your point, I think having that upfront, this is what we're looking for. You might actually lose out on some people, but it's not. You also have to realize it's not for everybody. So there is a place for hyper specialty roles. There is place for generalists, so to speak, for lack of better words. I consider myself as one, and they always look down on me. By the way, when I said I'm a generalist, they're like, "You're a jack of all trades, master of none."
But you don't know anything.
Yeah, basically, right? That is, by the way, that's real. Okay, that stereotype that they put you in is real. When you say you're a generalist, they're like, "Yeah, you're not." That's not what I'm saying. When I'm saying I'm a generalist, that's not what I'm saying, right? Like, what I'm saying is there's a lot more than getting deep into technology. There are people that I can find to do those things, but there is a larger set of skill sets, which is to get things done in an environment which has a lot of people with a lot of different skill sets and motivations.
Yeah, that I think you also make a good point, right? I mean, you've started businesses, you've run businesses, you're running businesses currently, and I think that's also a consideration, right? I think the more experience that we get, and the more that we see of the world, right, it naturally creates opportunities to open up and see a broader spectrum, right? And I think maybe that's also a good angle to look at, right? If you're in a leadership role, it can be more helpful to have a wider purview of the problem space of the business, because it allows you to make better decisions that are more comprehensive, right? Than like, hey, I need to go fix a specific technical problem. but you need to know how to solve the problem and who can solve the problem, right? So again, it goes back then maybe not needing to be the expert and very, very deep on a single topic per se, but understanding where the depth of the skill or the topic can be helpful, so you can get somebody to solve the problem for you and delegate that ultimately.
Mhm. Well, you become, see, I hate to speak about myself, but that's the only reference I have to a lot of these things. But my mine came from my insecurity of not being good at one thing. Okay, so this was my way of actually succeeding, was to get things done somehow, right? I
Yeah,
still believe that as I did it, I realized that that's a skill that makes you thrive
yeah,
in an environment. So, but it came out of me not having the skills. So I still envy people who have got deep skills in one thing.
hmm,
I wish I had. Um,
yeah,
but so there is, I guess the world needs all kinds of people. Right? So, but we are talking about it by by hiring the way we are hiring, we are missing out on talent. I think that's what we're trying to say. Right? It's there is room for,
possibly,
but there is
possibly, yes.
potential that you are actually missing out on talent by being so narrow that you're missing out on a lot of people. Like I wouldn't get a job in today's world probably, and I've not tried in a while, but chances are it's difficult for me to find a role with the wide experience I've had. But what it did help is to start a business, to be successful, because that if I didn't do the things that we are talking about, I don't think I could have become an entrepreneur. I could have become a business owner because that requires much broader skill sets than narrowly focused on one thing.
Yeah, very, very fair. I think there's a lot of truth to that, right? To be able to connect the dots and have a again that bigger, wider perspective on matters at hand, right? Which it can still be supplemented with the necessary, technical or functional skills or what have you, right? And still, so you can still make progress, but you get people to work with that have that expertise and perhaps also greater interest in more depth in some areas.
Yeah. See, I think also when we say there's room for both, but when you are in leadership, I think this is a skill that should be outweighing any technical skills as a leader. You know what I mean? Like we're talking about general roles, and then you're talking about leadership roles, or roles that you've um, set aside for leadership growth. There are some roles you hire with the focus of that role growing into a leadership role. I think it's a non-negotiable to have to look for the skills that we're talking about, the breadth of knowledge. So
Yeah.
if you want to be anywhere close to leadership, I think this is a non-negotiable skills in my opinion.
Yeah,
Um,
I would agree. I would actually strongly agree, right? Which then I don't know, maybe maybe some advice to people that are looking to aspire into a leadership role, right? How did you make the transition from many years ago from a maybe more technical focus to a leadership focus? I mean, from our discussions, right? You've always had a tendency towards a more broader approach to problem solving, right? But if you have somebody who says, hey, you know what, I've gotten my certifications, I'm really good at technology A, B, and C, I can do some of these things really, really well. How do you what would you tell them to do in order to get into a broader role, a leadership role, where it is more important to have a wider set of skills?
I think part of it is also look be un, biggest reason why people do, in my opinion, do what they do is it's comfortable. They're good at something and they keep doing it because they're good at it. And it's the old cliche it says, be comfortable with being uncomfortable. But I'll flip it around and say, be uncomfortable being comfortable. Okay, so if you want to be in leadership, just look at yourself and say, am I being comfortable? Let me do something which is not in my comfort zone. And in fact, I had this conversation with somebody 2 days ago about him feeling stuck in a career where
Hmm.
I know what I'm going to do tomorrow. He switched jobs recently, like 6 months ago. He's like, yeah, it felt good for a few months, but I'm still doing the same thing that I did before. I want to explore and do
Yeah.
more things. You know what's stopping people? What stopped him at least? I mean, this was my coaching session. His what was his stopping was his fear of, because I talked about mindset shifts and taking risks and things like that. For him, it was like, I don't think I'm going to go start a business and become an entrepreneur. That's not what I want to do. But I still want to do something else within
Hmm.
this. How do I
Hmm.
even get started? So one of the things I told him is, prepare. What's the worst that can happen if you want to do something else? He wanted to be in leadership. To begin with, I said, do you think you have the skills for it? He thought that he did. He's like, I'm managing these teams, but I'm managing more from a technical perspective. But I want to go do more of people management. But he was hesitant to do it because he was moving away from his skill sets. So one of the things I asked him is, what's the worst that can happen? You do this. He's like, well, I do this and I fail. And then what? I just go back to what I was doing before.
Yeah, you find out that you don't like it, which is also something learned.
Right? So, like that, if that's the worst that's going to happen, are you prepared for it? He's like, yeah. Then what should you do? He's like, then I'm going to go talk to my manager and say, this is what I want to do. I want to spread my wings and I want to do more of team management. I want to look at strategy more instead of being focused on this one thing. And he's like, now I'm clear about going and talking and at least asking for what I want to do. So there are two things in it. One is you feeling that you're comfortable with the choice, that you're prepared for losing out, so to speak, on your core skill sets for a certain period of time while you're trying something new. And two, to go have a conversation with whoever it is that's going to make a decision. Like most of the time people don't even tell their managers that's what they want to do. And then they
Mhm.
complain that they're not getting it.
Right. Yeah. And
Right?
I think you know the what I if any people leaders are listening and watching this, what I would tell them is to stop listening here and go talk to their people and start a dialogue about what it is that they want, right?
Mm-hmm.
This people development, their career development, and really make it a comfortable dialogue where it's not like, oh, if you feel like somebody says, you know what, I'd like to go work over there or do something different, that doesn't become a conversation about, oh, I need to look for a replacement because they're not happy, right? That it's truly like, hey, I want to build engagement. I want to let people grow. Because at many organizations, there's way more work around than what you can do with the people that you have, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so this is then, I think, the opportunity of, whether you have this narrow job profile or not, right? That you can give people an opportunity of like saying yes more often, to take something new on and to learn something new, as long as you know that you can go back, or 6 months or a year later there will be something else again, right? This, if you don't have to feel
Yes.
stuck and be married to that thing forever and ever again, right? Which then goes back to my point about the narrow job focus, right?
Yeah.
If you're boxed in and you're labeled with that guy or that gal, they can only do one thing. They're good at that. They're really good, but
Yeah.
we've never seen them do anything else. So we keep making the do it thing, whatever they're good at, and only that.
And find work.
Yeah,
You're going to
exactly.
run out of work at some point for that
Yeah.
specific
Yeah.
thing, right? But you're right on that one point, which is about um, the putting people in boxes, and leaders should have those conversations with their people about what they want to do. But let's talk about, as a leader, I've tried to do that always. I've always been open and all that. But that ways I've always given to people is, don't wait for your manager or your director or whoever it is to come and talk to you about your career. You own your career. You have to go have those conversations. And if you still don't get it, then go find something else, right? That matches with where you want to go. The last thing you want to do is to blame your organization, blame your manager for not giving you the opportunities.
So it
It's
is.
your job to manage your career. Go ask for it. If you ask for it, most of the time you will get it.
Yeah, if you don't ask, you definitely won't get it.
Correct. Unless you are gifted to work for a leader who's actually cares about you
Mhm.
and comes and which does exist, but let's face it, it doesn't exist most of the time. But yeah, if you don't ask for it, you're not going to get it. Assume that. So ask for it. The other thing I'll say is this is something I have is do the job before you get the job.
That's good advice. Yeah.
So I think we talked about this in our last podcast, where like in 2005 when they asked me to be a lead, or I said I don't know if I want to do it. Eventually, agreed to do it. And one of my friends who then worked for me for a long time after that, he had been in this country longer than I was at that time. I mean, he was already a citizen and all that. So the advice he gave me was, dude, they're paying you the same money. They're asking you to do more. Don't do it. Ask for more money. My instinct at that time was, hey, I'm having a lot of responsibilities. I like having responsibilities. Let me try it. And Charles told me I could just go back to what I was doing before. So it's okay. And and that's what made it successful was that I got a chance to prove myself that I can do the job before I demanded that I got the job. So it's not as much as you just um, wanting the job, it is you doing it, and then you can demand it because now you've proven yourself.
Right. Yeah, but
So
that can only happen if you get the opportunity, right? So number one is either you ask for it. Number two, somebody asks you to
yeah,
take on something new, but you must say yes.
yes,
Then you go do it, even if it doesn't come with a grand pay increase or promotion or whatever else it may be, right? This opportunity of like, hey, I can fan out and do something different, and also show that I'm not a one-trick pony, right? I can
correct.
solve a problem over there too, and I did a good job there, and there's another problem that comes up and I can go solve that too. And all of a sudden it's like, whoa, okay, we got more problems to be solved, right? And I think that's something not to forget also, right? For people who are in these maybe narrow jobs, right? That this saying yes to opportunity, even if it doesn't look like the ultimate endpoint, that can
Mhm.
be a stepping stone into that direction.
I think the mindset, again, going back to the mindset, is look at it as something you're trying and you're okay to fail at that and go back to doing what you're doing before, which is always an option. I think sometimes we do over process things and just say no, right? Like
Yeah,
because it's not something we want to do. And if
right.
you're open to trying, just go try it. If you fail, just go back to doing what you're doing and life is back. Right. So it's not as complicated as
Yeah,
we make it be sometimes.
yeah. Okay, sounds good. Yeah, very, very interesting discussion on this. So what do you think? What's our conclusion? So if we ask the question of like, is a narrow focus in job roles helpful or harmful? What do we conclude with?
It is hurtful if you're looking to hire into a role for a long term, especially with some leadership focus. But if you're looking to solve a specific problem that you have right now, then it's not as big of a problem, you know. But in general, as hiring managers and leaders, it's time to reflect on your hiring practices. And overall, it doesn't hurt to prioritize broader skills. So, for example, you can still say, I need this specialization to get started, but teamwork and adaptability is what we need for this team to grow. So, I guess what I'm saying is try to get both, but set that expectation that we are hiring you for this, but for you to thrive, these are all the things. And it may not be a fit, it's a mutual thing. right? So I guess in other words, I think it does hurt. I guess when I'm listening to myself speaking, it's just two bros talking, right? So we're not experts by any means, but I still feel it is hurting, and you're missing out on a lot of talent by not having those skills to be valued as much as it should. The
Yeah, I
softer
think
skills.
yeah, I think very well said, right? This unknown opportunity, right? The longer you leave people keep doing the same thing that they're doing, right? The window continues to close, whether you limit people's growth from being able to do more and take on more responsibilities, or if they ultimately get, disappointed in not being able to take on more responsibilities and then head somewhere else to do something different. So yeah, I think something to think about, right? Like you said, a topic for people leaders to think about how they work with their team, develop their team, and maybe look beyond the short focus. And also for people themselves, if they feel like, hey, I'm doing less than what I'm capable of, to take an initiative, right? To have a conversation, maybe even if it's not the direct manager, to talk to somebody in an organization or a mentor or a coach to help them guide through that, right? How to approach it. And I think that's the responsibility and accountability, like you said, very well. We're responsible for our own path, and we need to take the initiative, even though there may be many people that will help along the way, right? But this first step and this connection, reaching out and asking for help, that's that we're responsible for ourselves.
Yeah, ultimately, that I think that. What do you agree? What do you think? You've done this longer than I have in the corporate world, so your value.
Yeah, no, that's why I think this is very I think a very prudent approach, right? This balance. To me, at the end of the day, is that we need to be deliberate about what we're doing with our people, right? You need to, I think, really need to understand that why somebody's in a role and why somebody has the technical skills and the contributions that they make. And just the conversation about, hey, are you good with what you're doing? What about other opportunities? We have other fish to fry, other problems to solve, anything that might be interesting, right? But just keeping that dialogue, that door open, that allows people to see more of the world, I think is crucial. Because again, it builds engagement, it builds participation, and ultimately for the business, better results. And that's why I think it's something to keep in mind, especially again, organizations that have these very tight, technically focused roles that they have. Awesome. We're at the end of our conversation, end of our time.
I think so. I think, yeah, we are at what, 35 minutes? I think so.
Okay.
This was good, man. We should do more of these.
Yes, absolutely. Very interesting to reflect, and again, hopefully helpful to listeners and watchers, and maybe also reflect and see if there's a different and better approach to help their organizations grow and succeed. Thanks, Anand, for your time. And
thank you, Dominic. Thanks for having me. And thanks
talk again soon. And see you, everybody. Yeah. Thanks for watching. Hopefully that was helpful. And see you on the next podcast. If you have any comments and suggestions, ideas, reflections, leave a comment. Let us know how you deal with narrow job profiles, if this is something helpful to you, or if this is something that you may be thinking about looking into and changing to enable your organization and your team and your people to better contribute. Until next time, see you then.
Peace.